welcome to another video from Fantasy Football Scout. And yes, your eyes and ears do not deceive you. It is the return of FPL Sunday with David Munday. After an extended time away from the front lines of FPL, I've come back and I'm ready to help ease your pain or maybe massage your ego depending on how your game week went. Those of you who've seen the show before will know the drill. I say by now, but it has been a while, so yeah. You know what I mean. If you've seen this show before, you know exactly how this works. You get the story of your game week in the live chat. We read through a couple of sob stories, a couple of epic stories of the game week, just to try and capture the state of everyone's emotions just as the game week is finished. And yeah, we go from there. And we've got some other things to talk about as well. We'll talk about some big talking points from the current game week, and we will also see what that means for the game weeks moving forward. But if your game week has gone truly terrible and you'd rather think about anything else, and of course you could always just not watch this and I won't be offended, I promise. But considering this is my first stream since about October, considering that Frank Lampard is back at Chelsea, Erling Haaland is back in the Man City team and back in the goals, the theme of this week's episode is comebacks. So if you're watching this live, please drop your favourite, most eagerly anticipated comeback of all time in the chat. They can be football ones, they can be sporting ones, you know, like not football ones, or they could just be real world stuff or just fictional things. So, you know, there's a new Indiana Jones movie out soon, so you could maybe go with that, although actually not everybody particularly liked the Kingdom Skull movie, did they? So maybe, let's be honest, some comebacks are terrible. Speaking of terrible comebacks, apparently my sound is not very good, and you can tell I'm out of practice because I forgot to move my microphone to a more optimal position, which is here. Like the one thing I forgot to do. So if you guys could let me know as to whether or not that has made a difference, that'd be great. That was well timed for me talking about bad comebacks, right? First 5 minutes in, you could barely hear me because my microphone was in the wrong place. But just to reiterate that, your favourite comeback of all time, was it Frank Lampard at Chelsea? Was it Erling Haaland this week? Was it even me coming back to YouTube? Well, you know, just stick that in the chat. And as I said, doesn't even have to be football related. You can do what you like. So with that out of the way, it's time to get started proper. But before we continue, do not forget that something very important for you guys to all do. If you haven't already done this, it's time to subscribe. It's time to hit that bell notification and like this video so that Fantasy Football Scout know that you want more content like this. Before I go into my favourite tweets of the week, I will just go through the chat and read out a couple of good and bad stories. So thank you very much to Heather, who scored 60 points this game week, had Haaland and Watkins captain. Wow. Nice. That's left field, and it seems to have paid off with Watkins getting yet another goal. Barry Coleman got 57 points this week, got 150 last week, so some green arrows I hope for you. 64 points for Sinue this week, but no Arsenal assets, which, to be fair, I can understand that, and Heike Nuo agrees with that as well. Martinelli is so painful to watch when you don't have him. I agree, I don't have Martinelli either, so totally understand there. Let's move on to our favourite tweets of the week, of which there were quite a lot. I imagine most of you are joining us fresh from the Liverpool versus Arsenal game. I will just apologise for the fact that I haven't had the chance to really capture any social media reaction from that game yet. It was pretty seismic. I don't have a take on whether or not Robertson was elbowed by an official. I do apologise. You know, the game has just finished, so yeah. I mean, it was a great game though, which is hard to disagree with. But all of my tweets, I do apologise, are mostly from Saturday. So yeah, apologies there. But they're pretty good though. There's some great tweets so far. And actually, we start perhaps with my favourite tweet of the week, which is FPL themselves getting in on the banter. We've been joking about none getting assists for years. And some of you might even remember Craig Noon playing for Cardiff. Quite a while ago now, of course, but we got a whole year of pretending that Craig no one was getting those points. But the joke has finally come around full circle with this. As ever, the FPL community knows how to keep it spinning, though. So we'll just go through it. So I am always aware of the fact that there's podcast listeners. Basically, the official FPL account replied to someone who said I should have captained none because none got a stupid amount of assists yesterday. And what they did was like Photoshop a picture of the guys, like just the name None, above a score of 14 points with a blue and green shirt on the FPL app. It was fantastic. And then I want to get people's thoughts on this. We had Great Oriahi who replied to that by saying, how about we have a None chip next season, which I'm guessing means one game week in any season, you are going to get points specifically for None. I don't really know how you would factor in playing that. You're not going to look at a game week and be like, this looks like a game week where we're going to have lots of assists from None. But anything that adds chaos to this game is something that I think is really exciting. So even though I don't like it when people get hurt, when a highly owned player gets injured, I'm like, yes, good, right, we're going to have some chaos now. Everybody's going a different way. The None chip could be a way to make that happen. Heike says he just remembered that he got ice cream, which is his best comeback ever, which I'm guessing means he's not had ice cream in a while. I think that's fair. Does it compare with Frank Lampard back at Chelsea? Well, let's be honest. No, that's not really a good comeback yet. Ice cream is better. But speaking of Lampard, though, and I feel a bit bad here. I've stuck my own tweet in tweet of the week. Maybe that was the wrong thing to do. I don't know, but I feel like a lot of people out there will probably appreciate it. So I guess I might get away with it. Lampard is back in the Premier League, as I've already mentioned. So therefore, so is an old joke, which I can only apologise for rehashing. It was apt on Sunday as well, because we had Ben Chilwell, who was widely owned, was tipped in the scout picks, who's in my team as well. He was on the bench. And for the benefit of the podcast listeners, it is two pictures of Frank Lampard. You can guess which ones they are. We've got one of him smiling, one of him doing his serious face, with the caption, in my mini league's got Chilwell, actually. Would be funny if I didn't start him. No, but seriously, he's on the bench, which is what happened. And yeah, it's just classic FPL, to be honest. If we're talking about comebacks, one of your players you're owning on the bench, that's an FPL comeback, isn't it? That happens all the time. We'd actually been doing pretty well for this one. And then that happened. So, yeah, we're going to talk about Chelsea players in a little bit, but for those of you on the receiving end of Lampard kind of screwing over his mini-league power, at least you have this mild laugh and you have this moment of solidarity with me. And in fact, I've even gone as far as to wear my special Chilwell shirt, which actually you can't see unless I stand up. There we go. Got my Chilwell shirt on. Repping with you guys if you're also suffering from the same 0 points from old Chile. What else were people talking about on Saturday? Yes, Ivan Toney. Well, we move on from a moment of solidarity from me to more of a formal and official apology from a David Munday spokesperson. I, like many of you, sold Ivan Toney this week so I could get Erling Haaland back in. I was, of course, quite concerned when Brentford won a penalty and over the moon when it was missed. I then made a big mistake. I then tweeted about how happy I was that happened, and that was not good. I said someone missed a penalty who I sold for a hit instead of someone scoring a penalty who I bought for a hit. What's going on? I don't know why I tweeted something like that. It was so stupid because of course I completely jinxed it, and they got another penalty and he scored that one. And it turns out I'm not the only one to blame for this, because Joe also has very much been manifesting Toney not doing so well this week. And he tweeted, "Toney misses his first penalty in 5 years. My work here is done," with a picture of him literally dressed as Harry Potter, which looks like quite an old picture, to be fair. So I don't think he specifically dressed up for the occasion. That would be quite sad, wouldn't it? But yeah, I think between me and Joe, the amount of bad jinx juju juice that we generated to get Toney to score that penalty, we can only say that we are sorry, and we will come back as better people next time. Right, and so I got a lot of tweets. About forwards and Haaland. Obviously, why wouldn't I have lots of tweets about these guys? So, thankfully, despite Toney's best efforts, the switch that I made and the switch that lots of people made seemed to pay off, which is Toney to Haaland. And a lot of us had front line of Kane, Haaland and Watkins, and quite happy because actually in the end, even though Toney got those points, it was only 4, I think, in the end. And yeah, that meant all 3 of those forwards got more points than him. So I'm with Viper on this one, who said that he's a bit of a purist and there's nothing more exciting than all three of your forwards getting big hauls. The thing is FPL's changed a lot over the years. I don't know if there's people in the chat who've been playing this for 10 or so years like I have. But back in the day, all your expensive players were your forward players. And your midfield players, you had maybe one or two who you looked to for goals and assists and things like that. But really, the big hitters every week were your forwards. And if you didn't have three big hitting forwards banging goals in, then you weren't doing so well. And we've kind of gone through some phases of, 3-5-2, and we've had 3-4-3, but with one of the three maybe being like a 7 million. And to be fair, it does work and it's a lot of fun. But and to be fair, that's the exact setup we've got here because Watkins is around that price point. But having three forwards get you the points is very, very satisfying. I can't work out if Ash, FPL Hints from FPL Juice, is bitter or not about his tweet that he's got here, which is a picture of a ready sorted packet of crisps, a plain ham sandwich and a bottle of water from, I think, Tesco's, with the caption, vanilla captaincy rewarded again, I see, which he's, of course, referring to Haaland. It's difficult to say, isn't it? I mean, I captained Haaland like a lot of people, and it felt good to get the points, but it doesn't feel all that exciting because, everyone else is after it. What I will say is if you also have come here and you don't really want to talk about FPL this week because you've had a bad game week and you're looking for things to talk about, you don't just have to talk about your favourite comebacks of all time. There's another shout out for that one. Doesn't even have to be football. Let me know in the chat. I'd like to know what your favourite meal deal is, and if I get enough meal deal submissions, I might even tell you what my favourite one is. It definitely isn't ready salted plain ham and the water, which, as we can see here, is the best way of describing captaining Haaland. So let me know if you do like that meal deal combination, then please stand up because I've never met anyone who does. But speaking of Haaland, we've got Ash from FPL Hints. We had two Ashes here. It's very confusing. It was Ash Juice that went with the meal deal, and Ash Hints is talking about Haaland for next week when they are playing Leicester, where that is going to be messy, isn't it? I mean, if you don't have Haaland already, I thought about having a section in this about do we get Haaland? I mean, but it's not worth my time, I guess. Leicester look absolutely dreadful. Haaland is Haaland. The EO is just going to be horrible if you don't have him. We're expecting some records to be broken. And in terms of that fixture, I think a lot of people have been looking at Grealish, and I was particularly tickled by Korf's tweet, where he said, "You just know the second that we all buy Grealish next week, Pep will drop him from the face of the earth." Yeah, that's probably fair. I am still very, very terrified of going anyone other than Haaland. And Heike New has actually made an excellent point on Haaland, actually, which is that if Haaland does get substituted early against Bayern, then I will captain him against Leicester. I mean, that's a good point. We should probably remember that. So that is all of my tweets of the week completed. It was good fun going through those again. It was just a classic week of FPL this week. Some great stories, some great tweets. And if you ever have something that you tweet on the weekend that you would like to get on the show, if you tag me in it, then, I will see it. And it stands a chance of being paraded as one of my tweets of the week. So, moving on now to an area where I realised that I missed one thing I was supposed to pull in, which is how my team has got on in Gameweek 30. Now, because I've not been on the show in ages, I thought I would just go over how my team has gone for a while, because I think the last one I did was like Gameweek 14. And with all of the hectic nature of that Liverpool game, I completely forgot to pull my team in for Gameweek 30 just gone. So in a minute, I will just have to read that out as if it's a list, which actually will help the podcast listeners. So maybe it's serendipitous. But yeah, I've had a very interesting FPL season because when I was first doing those videos, I was doing pretty bad. And the fact that you guys were still tuning in every Sunday to watch me talk FPL when I was having a really bad season is actually very sweet. And I have to thank you for that. I was around about 800k when the World Cup hit. So I was really ready for that World Cup, even as someone who was a bit like, why is this World Cup on now? Why is it in the winter? It was very controversial. I was ready for a break from FPL because I was not doing particularly well. I came out of the World Cup just on fire, and I'm not entirely sure why. I'm going to say luck because, I don't want to, act like I pretend it's any particular skill on my part when actually it's the football players doing the work. But yeah, I had just a crazy couple of weeks where I think I went from 800k to 100k in something like 3 game weeks. and then I've just managed to keep it going, and I currently sit at 57k. But I think that's slightly down. I had a quick look at live FPL in the second half of the Liverpool game. Salah is still owned by more people than I realise every time he scores a goal, and I don't own Martinelli. He's the Arsenal one I don't have. I've got 3 Arsenal who aren't him, so he's very difficult to get to, and he is quite damaging as well. But yeah, I'm up to the 50s, 60s, which is quite nice. The secret to my success in that period is, I guess, I've taken a lot more risks than usual. I've had a lot going on just sort of outside of FPL, which I'm probably not the only one like that. So maybe if you are watching this and FPL has had to take a slight backseat for you recently, you may feel the same way. It sometimes makes you realise that actually, what's the worst that could happen if you try something risky? I historically have sort of felt a little bit of pressure sometimes to make the right move, with just the pressure of what doing FPL content can be like, which is, not everybody feels that way. That's just how I respond to it. There's other people out there who are very happy taking risks in front of people and not too worried about what would happen if it goes wrong. But that wasn't my play style, and I managed to get to a point where I kind of was a bit sort of like, you know what? Who cares if this goes wrong? Let's give it a go. And I tried that a couple of times, took some hits, more hits than usual, more than I usually would in January. I did a couple of swapsies too. I just broke so many of my own rules. I took out Kane and then put him back in again. I did a hokey cokey with Rashford. I think I did one with Fernandes in the early January as well. And yeah, it was crazy the difference that made. Just sort of letting go of worst case scenario. It seems to have made all the difference. So those of you who remember me as a boring FPL manager, I've almost slightly changed, and it's quite nice because it seems to have worked. Trying something different for a season sometimes can be kind of fun. So yeah. So in terms of my team, I do apologise. I will not have it on the screen, but I can read it out. I got, in the end, for this game week, 61 points, but I was on a -4. Kepa in goal, Trippier, Chilwell, and Moreno was my Shaw replacement. I was very brave. I benched Matoma, and so I have sort of wondered if maybe the officials for the Spurs game also benched Matoma, because wow. The less said about that game, the better, because I think everybody's already covered it. But I benched Matoma because I still have this problem of my 5-man midfield. I'm looking forward to wildcarding because I've got McAllister, Saka, Ødegaard, Rashford, and Matoma are my midfielders, because I have had 3-5-2 for a long time, and it was only 2 or 3 weeks ago that I got Watkins in when I sold Haaland. I got Watkins in for Greenwood. So my front line is Haaland, who I captained, Watkins, and Kane. So my bench was Ward, Matoma, Estupiñán, and White. So yeah, that's how I got on this week. I took a -4, I got rid of Shaw, and I got rid of Tony to get Haaland and Moreno, which 29 points I got between my 2 new players, which I'm quite happy with. And yes, anyway, saying Matoma should have hauled it. He really should have done. I got really lucky in that regard. I did a little bit of a Fantasy Football Scout table scouring before I made my decision to bench it. He basically just had the lowest XGI of basically between him, McAllister, Saka, and Ødegaard, I think, over the previous 4 matches, because I just couldn't separate them. In terms of my own judgment, I was thinking I feel like all 4 of these players could get something, and so I just had to sort of leave it up to the computer, so to speak, and the computer told me to bench Matoma. So maybe the computer was the one refereeing that game, because wow, just insane. But I'm looking forward to wildcarding. Where I'm at in terms of my chips right now is that I have used my bench boost now, and I still have a free hit, I still have a triple captain, and I still have a wild card. And so my general plan is I'm dead-ending my team into next week, Gameweek 31, which is quite liberating, because when you dead-end your team before you free hit, wild card, etc., you can take even more risks than usual. So that's what I'm doing into next week. Then I am going to be free hitting for that blank game week, and then I'll be wild carding for 33. And then probably triple captaining a Man City player, I think, in their double game week. Because they have some nice fixtures then. Looking forward to that. So yeah, that's how my team's getting on. I'm just going to go through a couple of your teams as well, because let's be honest, I'm not the only FPL manager out there, and I'm not even the best one. So who really wants to hear from me? So in terms of what everyone else has got up to this week, Barry Coleman says he can't wait to get rid of Maddison. I hear you, my friend. I don't even own the guy, but historically, I've not been a big fan. Sinuwe says that Kilman gave him 7 points on his bench that was blocked by the Chilwell 0-pointer. Well, yeah, that is very disappointing, but understandable. Let's be honest. a load of us went all in on the Chelsea defence because it's Wolves. I would have made the same decision, so you can't really, can't really blame yourself there. Three Pat Evra. Oh, right, okay, yes. I wonder if that is the real him. If it is, I love this game too, my friend. He says 62 points and up to 27k. Martinelli to Maddison has been my worst transfer ever. It's cost me 12 points in 2 game weeks. Yeah, that's a hard one. I understand why people sign Maddison, but I don't know. I think people sometimes forget how much of a troll he can be. When he first arrived in FPL, which would have been, 4 or 5 years ago when he arrived from Norwich, he was quite trolly near the beginning. I know Az was a big fan, and I just never got the hype. And then he went through a good spell. He did go through a good spell, but I think he's back to his true colours. I think he's back to troll time. Especially, anyone who watched Leicester yesterday, wow, pretty much everyone who saw that game yesterday. Oh, one of the worst Leicester performances ever. And very interesting that they brought in Jesse Marsh. Well, it looks like they're bringing in Jesse Marsh as well. Very, very strange decision there, which could potentially make them almost whipping boys to aim for in the next couple of weeks, to be honest. So very interesting. We've got a question from Zuba who says, I got 59 points with a hit. That's not bad. But he does say, why didn't Chilwell play? Well, we are going to answer that question fairly soon. After I've talked about Man United. And while we're on that subject, let's head to virtual Old Trafford. So, we're done with my stupid tweets. We're done with my stupid team. Let's roll our sleeves up and talk some proper FPL now. And the big question, of course, is what to do with Marcus Rashford. Well, he is an injury concern for loads of you now, me included. He limped out of the Man United game in their win over Everton. Apparently, it's a groin issue that forced him off, and is going to need further assessment. Now, whenever I see anyone with muscle problems, I'm always like, oh, yep, that's them. That's them out, because muscle problems, it's not quite the same as an impact injury or other kinds of injury. It's the sort of thing that just needs rest. You can't really run, you can't really jog off a pulled groin, to be honest, because you're just going to make it worse. And so, yeah, I was a bit concerned when that happened. The handy thing is we've got a lot of quotes. We have a lot of quotes from Ten Hag, which are useful to rely on. They're not necessarily clear cut, but I think that you can read between the lines on a lot of these, and it's quite useful. So I'm not going to try and do the accent here. I'll just sound like Gold member from Austin Powers. So yeah, he said we have to wait and see what it is and how bad it is. It doesn't look well. We have to protect our players. Everyone wants the best players on the pitch. Everyone wants to see great entertaining football like you see today, but then you need your best players. That's one quote from Ten Hag. He told BBC Radio 5 Live that we have to wait. It doesn't look well. It can't be that you play 3 games in 6 days. We have to protect our players. And then he also told the BBC it's too much, especially when you play last Sunday night and then the first game on the Saturday. In the week, you have to make the game against Brentford, the game instead of the Carabao Cup, so you get punished for reaching the final, so it's not right. I don't know about Marcus. It is like this when you have to play so many games in short notice, especially when the schedule is this tight. Players can't recover and you can run the risk that players get injured. You have to be aware of that. You can't say exactly what has happened. Even when you speak to him, we have to wait until tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, and then we will see as to the diagnosis. So the general process is pretty normal. Managers will always, after the game, usually be like, I have no idea, because he's not a doctor, and they usually need some time for the player to, whatever the injury is, to sort of settle. A lot of the time, you probably notice on the sidelines, you're going to see so many players sat there on a bench with ice strapped to various different body parts, and sometimes they just have that even if they haven't got an injury, because it just helps reduce any swelling from just running around loads. And so when it comes to injuries, exactly the same thing. If there's any kind of swelling around whatever injury he's got, they have to wait for that to go down before they can assess it. That's pretty standard. So the physios are going to have a look at that early this week, and we'll find out in the next few days the specifics of it. But when you look at the fact that he's talking about how many games United have had and have coming up, does kind of make you feel like they aren't going to risk him, especially when you consider the stakes as well. They've still got pretty decent chance of finishing in the top 4. They've got some teams that are chasing them down, but they've got a pretty good chance. And so, I personally feel like it's just my hunch. It's just my hunch, but I think that the time for selling Rashford could be now. I did mention earlier on that I never wish this upon anyone, especially not Marcus Rashford. As an England fan, I love the guy, but whenever you get anyone who is highly owned who gets injured, it is quite an exciting time for FPL purposes, because it means that you've got a highly owned player. All of his owners are going to go all in different directions. The chances of them all going for the same guy are quite low, so it just creates more opportunities, and that's very exciting for the season running and when there's double game weeks and chips to be played. So speaking of replacements for Rashford, there might actually be a fairly easy one for us to look at, which is his colleague Bruno Fernandes. Now, in the last couple, I appreciate he's a slightly different price, but there's actually quite a lot of money in people's banks right now. I've got loads of money in my bank. I sold Haaland. I have got him back, to be fair, but I think I had Trent in my defence a couple of weeks ago, and selling him freed up some cash. So actually going from Rashford to Fernandes is not really that hard a thing to do, really. Now, there has been a bit of a talking point around Fernandes recently because he's played in deeper positions, and it's being described as the quarterback role by the Fantasy Football Scout editorial team, specifically Neil, who I actually forgot to give a plug to before I came into this section, because when we talk about the big talking points from the game week that's just finished, the best place to always find it is Fantasy Football Scout's editorial team. The scout notes are usually up either Saturday night or Sunday morning. They go into great levels of detail in terms of the games that have just happened, so you can get all of the good juicy stuff that you want to see and all of the good juicy stats that you need to know about your team pretty quick. And they are also very useful for people planning to do an FPL stream on a Sunday evening, literally just as the last game of the game week is finished. It's really useful to benefit from that. So I just want to give them a shout out, because a lot of what I've got here has come from Neil's keyboard, who, as many of you know, is someone who I'm a big fan of. So, yes, Fernandes, quarterback role, midfield, quarterback role against Everton at the weekend. So yes, he is still sort of playing in a deeper role, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. This is the thing. Sometimes in FPL, you get these factors that come into play, like, oh, Richarlison's playing up front for Everton now. Surely that means he's going to get more goals. Well, actually, no. Some of you might remember that him playing up front meant he wasn't as effective as when he was playing on the wing, for example. So it's always good to kind of means test these different factors. Does it actually affect their ability to score FPL points? Well, it's possible that in the case of Fernandes, it might not. You might not actually have to be as worried about this deeper role as you might think. Because against Everton, he still managed to create a game-high total of 6 chances. 2 of them were big. That's an Opta subjectivity term, of course. And, of course, he did have a good headed opportunity of his own to score, which he didn't put in. But, he's still... Basically, the point is he can still get in the areas where he could potentially get a goal threat. And he's got a double game week. He's got double game weeks, S in brackets. There's lots of games for United to play still coming, and so a time now could be a good time for him. What I've put on the screen is some stuff from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. You're going to get sick of this. You are going to get so sick of me mentioning this, but the Fantasy Football Scout members area is great. And if you are not subscribed as a member, then ticking that box to become one and signing up is going to be one of the best decisions you ever made as an FPL manager. It's always helped me in my time as an FF Scout subscriber to the members area. It makes a huge difference. You get so much stuff. I mean, most of you know by now, but if you don't, just head to fantasyfootballscout.co.uk and look for members benefits in the top, and it will tell you everything you can get. You are going to get just a snapshot of what's available in this video. So what I've got on the screen is the heat maps of Fernandes and Sabitzer, who has actually been playing slightly more advanced for United, which has allowed Fernandes to play, on paper, deeper. But the reason why I put their heat maps up is this is their heat maps in the last game. And what you can see is, yes, fine, Fernandes is dropping deep quite a lot, and he's doing a lot of donkey work. He's actually very good at that. It's something that we sometimes get overlooked. It has historically been overlooked in his play. That is something he is very, very good at. I mean, in some respects, you could even argue that Fernandes is like one of the best number 10s in the Premier League and one of the best number 6s at the same time, which is just testament to the fact that he's a quality player. So he does touch the ball quite a lot in the deep areas. Sabitzer technically on paper playing further forward. But what you will see is that despite playing deeper and dropping deeper and getting the ball and recycling the ball with those sort of positions, he is still actually taking up a lot of advanced positions and touching the ball a lot in advanced areas. So, general point is if you see people being like, well, I'm not sure about Fernandez's deeper position. Well, it doesn't necessarily matter because this guy is incredible. And while he is doing well there, he may stay there. That doesn't have to be a problem. You will have Casemiro free from suspension now. You've got Eriksen, who came back the weekend. At the weekend, it's still the weekend. Everyone forgets what day it is when it's Easter. Yesterday, on Saturday, against Everton, Eriksen was back. So you got two quality players to come back in and potentially play a deeper role for United, which could mean that he might actually get pushed further forward again. But as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to matter. It does not have to matter because he has done very well deeper. We got a quote from Ten Hag on Fernandes, which would be useful as well. He said, I think he was brilliant, but he was already playing brilliantly over many games in a deeper role. Not everyone is recognising. Even last week against Newcastle, he played very well. This week against Brentford, he played really well. And today, a brilliant game. He was definitely one of maybe the best player or maybe the best player on the pitch, but we had more who were at quite a high level. So it's just him talking about the fact that he's fully capable of playing there. I think, looking at United's fixtures for the double, offensively, I quite fancy Fernandes as my Rashford replacement. But it might not be immediate because, of course, I've got my free hit in 32. I might just maybe wait and see. But I very much have Fernandes on a list as a potential Rashford replacement, if not immediately, at the very least in the short to medium term. But speaking of their double game week, I did just want to touch on one other element, which is Man United's defence, because a lot of us sold Shaw this week, I imagine. We had the choice, really, of sort of, do we go like for like? I know a lot of people went Malacia. Malacia was on the bench for scout picks. I didn't really fancy Malacia, just based on the fact that I thought United would get a clean sheet in this game, and defensively their fixtures in the short term look quite nice, at least a very short term. Next one now with the Everton game out of the way. I quite appreciate that was good, but we just have no idea about Shaw. I feel like Shaw, the way his injury is being described is very just not that much detail, and I kind of feel like maybe he might be back next week. So I just felt like Malacia could potentially be a short-term option. You're only going to play one game and then get benched for the next one. So that's why I went for Moreno at Villa. But yeah, in terms of United's defence, it's worth talking about it with this double game week coming up. So, against Everton, that clean sheet was their 9th home clean sheet of the season. And that means still that no Premier League team has more clean sheets at home. And no Premier League team has conceded fewer goals at home this season than United, with a total of 8. But the thing is, this is the thing here, is that only 3 of Man United's final 8 games of the season that we've got into the schedule are at home. We got Villa, Wolves and Fulham at home. And the away fixtures are a little bit mixed because you've got Forest away, Spurs away, Brighton away, West Ham away, and Bournemouth away. Now, a lot of those teams will be targeting those home matches as part of their sort of desperate bid to stay up. And, you're looking specifically there at Forest, who are much better at home than away. West Ham and Bournemouth, sort of similar situations with them, really need to score goals to stay up. Spurs and Brighton, they're 2 teams full of goals, to be honest. So, I gotta be honest, I'm not really. Yeah, I'm basically just thinking that United's defense isn't actually as essential as I thought it was a couple of weeks ago. The double game week does look good for attacking returns, which we've already discussed. But considering you've got Villa and Brighton are facing United in that double game week, you've got the most informed striker in the Premier League in Ollie Watkins, and Brighton. We've all got loads of Brighton attackers. We've got McAllister, we've got March, we've got Matoma. They're all pretty much. I think anyone who's an engaged manager right now must have Watkins and at least 2 Brighton attackers. So, we clearly think that they're a team that can score against United if you've got them now and you've got that double game week on your mind. And so, yeah, it just makes me think that, Man United's defence may be not all that essential. So, as I said, I replaced Shaw, but I didn't get Malacia. I went for Moreno. So, yeah, that's my view there. If you disagree with me, please tell me. I mean, if I'm saying anything here you think is a terrible thing, then I want to know, because that's what this stream is all about. We want to capture everyone's emotion at this particular point in the game week. And just a reminder for anyone, if you're just joining us, as it's my first stream in ages, and Lampard is back, and Haaland is also back in the goals, we want to know what your favourite comebacks are of all time. So that's United's situation. The one thing I've popped on the screen, which I appreciate, I've done it in a really bad way, so I'm just going to make it bigger, and then I'm going to read it out for the podcast listeners, is Man United's defending. Last 4 away matches in the Premier League. Only just one team. Just one team is Fulham. Fulham are the only team to have conceded more big chances in the last 4 away matches than United. They conceded 15. That's level with Leeds. And so they are very good defensively at home, but away from home, which is where they're spending most of their last fixtures of the season, not actually that good at defending. Another team a little bit like that, whilst we're on the subject of this game, Everton are another team that are just much better at home. They've now conceded at least 2 goals in each of their last 6 away games, and they haven't won a game away from home since Gameweek 9. So yeah, defensively, they're not very good. I think we all knew this anyway, but just in terms of the next couple of matches, it was just another game that makes me think that Fulham at home, Palace away, Newcastle at home in the next 3. Not obviously interested in Everton players, but I do think that Pereira could offer something for Fulham against them. Newcastle players are obviously continually in vogue this season, but it's the trip to Palace in a couple of weeks' time. It could be another reason to jump on an Eze train, or maybe you might want to opt for Elise, which is a little bit of a throw forward. So we have a Palace section, and potentially well-timed after my TikTok debut this week. I never thought I would be on TikTok. I thought I was too old for that, but yeah, the Fantasy Football Scout social team were like, let's have a TikTok, and I did one on Eze, and he got a goal, so I'm very happy with that, and he's playing Everton soon, so yeah, nice little promise of some Palace content very soon. If we've got any Eagles fans in the chat, do say. So I promised you chat on Ben Chilwell. So here he is. As I said already, if you're only just joining us, I'm wearing my Ben Chilwell shirt right here. That's where he spent most of Saturday, on the bench. And yeah, you want to know why he didn't play? Well, Frank Lampard's the reason. Didn't particularly get off to a good start, did he? But hey, in a way, I'm not surprised. I mean, I thought it was a very weird appointment. Everybody thought the Roy Hodgson going back. Oh, there's another comeback. You know what? That's my favourite comeback of the season at the very least. He's done fantastic. But yeah, Roy Hodgson coming back was met with a lot of criticism. But I think the Frank Lampard one is a weird one. Hodgson at least left on a mild high. Like, he retired and he chose to leave. And everyone was very sort of like happy to sort of, send him off to, live out the rest of his life enjoying himself. Without him leaving on a sour note. Lampard left on not a great note, and here he is, he's back, and he's even worse a note now because he's benched our flipping defender. But yeah, in terms of why he didn't play, Lampard said one of the challenging parts of coming in so quickly is to get up to speed with the medical and sports science, and obviously with the amount of games we have got coming up over the next 2 weeks. He talked specifically, he's actually kind of talking about Kante here. He said there's no worries about him, but he basically said there are a couple of selection issues, small concerns, so we have to protect a couple of players in the squad, and obviously they've got some European commitment still, incredibly, in this awful season that they're having. But yeah, so that's why Chilwell didn't play, which is, very annoying. And yet Gareth Pashley says, yep, didn't Lampard say something about protecting a couple of players? Implication being Chilwell was one. Yep, I think so. And so the conclusion here is that I wouldn't panic too much about your Chilwell. I think he's rested from this game. I know that Lampard is hardly Pep Guardiola level, but I still feel like Guardiola does that thing where he will, rather than go like one on one off, he tends to go, you get a rest and then you play the next 2, in a block of 3. I feel like that's probably going to happen with Chilwell, so I'm not too concerned about him. I mean, I'm slightly more concerned about Chelsea than I am about Chilwell necessarily starting games. So yeah, I mean, so Chelsea have now failed to score for 3 games in a row. Only one of their shots on the Molineux goals was on target. In fact, they were so bad that Neil on the Fantasy Football Scout website even went so far as to use a profanity to describe them. I was very shocked. I don't think I would have let that through when I was editor. I don't think. I'm joking when I say I probably would have let that through. But that just gives you an indication of how bad they were. The thing with Chelsea is that they like having a lot of shots, but they're just not really going anywhere with them. So in the last 4 matches, Chelsea are actually in the top 3 of all teams for shots, and in fact no team has had more shots in the box than them in the same period. It's very weird, But the table that we've got on the table here is that, which I'll make slightly bigger, is that in that same period, roughly only 8 Premier League teams have had fewer shots on target than them. They're just doing really bad for accuracy. And so the reason I mention that is because they've actually got some games coming up against teams that we all have defenders for. And I know that sometimes it can be very, very easy for you to look at the fixture tickers and go, oh, that's a quote big club, and I've got my kind of like middling price defender coming up to play them. I will bench them. Well, to be honest, like sometimes I'm happy taking the risk. So Brighton host them in game week 31. That's Brighton hosting Chelsea, and I'm tempted to start a Stupinian for that. Because when you look at how profligate, okay, I got there in the end, Chelsea are in front of goal, I wouldn't be too shocked. I would not be too shocked if they don't score in that game. And the Stupinian was obviously a lot of forward threat. So, yeah, I think I'm probably going to start a Stupinian in that because I just don't trust this Chelsea team. If I was a Chelsea player who was there under Lampard and remembers how bad it was, and then obviously he left, and then we've had another couple of managers come through, and then we've had him come back, I wouldn't exactly be sort of like ready to be like, oh yes, Frank, whatever you say, mate. I don't know. That's just me, and that's not even me trying to be disrespectful. It's just more the fact that he just left him losing his job made sense, and I think a lot of players will remember that. A couple of other teams who some of you will still have Raya and some Brentford defenders. They play them in game week 33. If I got Raya in my team, I'd happily start him against Chelsea. I think you get a clean sheet there. That might be after some of you wildcards, so maybe you might not have all your Brentford defenders still, but if you do, give it a go. And then we got Arsenal playing Chelsea in game week 34 as well. So your Ramsdales, your Whites, etc. I feel like they're worth starting against Chelsea because they just look so bad right now. And if they had hired a manager who wasn't Frank Lampard, I probably would feel less. I would just be a lot more likely to sit here and be like, oh, maybe they'll get a new manager bounce. Well, where are they going to get a new manager bounce from? They haven't got a new manager. They've got an old manager again. And, but the thing is, though, speaking of teams that have got an old manager again, I mean, Palace have an old manager in lots of senses. They've got a previous manager. They have a manager who also happens to have been alive a very long time. They're really doubling down on the idea of having an old manager. But for them, it seems to be working. And I just go back to what I was saying before. I think that's probably because Roy Hodgson, just as a manager, commands more respect at Palace than Lampard does at Chelsea. I didn't want to say that Lampard doesn't command respect at Chelsea because obviously he is a Chelsea legend and that we can't change that. But yeah, Palace under Roy Hodgson are looking good. So yeah, they obviously won 5-1 today at Leeds. The old manager dive, says Haikinu. Yeah, we always talk about the new manager bounce, the old manager dive. Maybe that's how we should describe Palace. Well, as I said, not Palace, sorry, Chelsea. We can't use that to describe Palace, who have got a bounce out of their old manager. So they beat Leicester 2-1. They've beaten Leeds 5-1. And when you remember that they had gone, what was it? Was it 13 games without a win? I think the game against Leicester, I think was their first win of 2023 or something bonkers. Having not scored for something like 7 games before that. They've now scored 7 goals in the last 2. Now, the fixtures have played a big part in that. Now, the fixtures are actually why myself and Tom Freeman, who many of you will know from his articles on Scout, he obviously does Goals Imminent video with Joe, does a captaincy videos as well. Me and him, we both actually independently of each other backed Eze for this particular game week. I did it in my article on the community site, and as I said, my TikTok debut, which I'm still super proud of as someone who's nearly 31. And then, yeah, Tom in his differentials article picked out Eze, and it's nice to see it come off. And yeah, the way that Palace have played last couple of games, they are sort of my source of differential picks right now. And so, yeah, let's start with Eze. So his place in the Palace 11 was restored to him, obviously, in the Leicester game because he wasn't playing under Vieira, which I still just cannot believe. It's just bonkers. It was his first 90-minute outing since game week 15. And Eze played well. I think he got the assist. He got the assist for Iverson's own goal from his free kick. But let's be honest, if you saw the game, you'd know that he was unlucky not to get the actual goal. He was very creative in open play. And the thing that I'm thinking about him is that I feel like he's been around in that Palace team long enough now that when Zaha's not there, he can sort of kind of puff out his chest and be like, do you know what? It's on me now. And I quite like that because he was that kind of figure when he played for QPR. So there's no reason why he can't do that for Palace. And he wasn't the only one who played well today, but I thought he was fantastic against Leeds. In terms of the stats then, going into this game, against Leicester. Against Leicester, he was the only player who had more shots in that game than Eze was Zaha, and no players who play for Palace had created more chances than Eze in the 4 matches leading up to that. Palace's fixtures are actually very appealing. I've done the same thing again. I've done this thing where I've tried to cram too much on the same slide, so I'll just make it bigger just for a moment and then make it smaller again. Let's pull that to the top. Palace on the season ticker just look amazing. So I think it was slightly higher before I screenshotted this. You can still just see me behind there. They are 3rd highest now because the Leeds game's out of the way. But if you sort the Fantasy Football Scout season ticker, which is, by the way, another reason to subscribe to Fantasy Football Scout members area if you haven't already, because it is a very useful tool, you will see that when you sort for attacking potential over the next, how many game weeks we've got left now? 8. Yeah, we've got 8 left between now and the end of the season. Palace rank 3rd, behind only Fulham and Liverpool for attacking potential. They are playing Southampton away, Everton at home, Wolves away, West Ham at home, Spurs away, Bournemouth at home, Fulham away, and Forest at home. I mean, you couldn't really ask for a better set of fixtures, to be honest. And then, well, the reason that me and Tom were big on Eze before this one was because they're playing Leeds as well, who, not particularly defensively sound. So yeah, Eze then, looking fantastic. The thing is that actually he kind of got a little bit eclipsed today. Now, his stats are still pretty good. So Eze did get his goal, so that's good. That means that my TikTok debut was not embarrassing, and Tom's reputation as a differential picker continues to be unchallenged, so that's good. He was 2nd for key passes in today's game against Leeds with a total of 3. His XGI, so his expected goal involvement in that particular game, was the 3rd best in the game. But as I said, he did get a little bit eclipsed by someone who I'm very pleased to talk about as a Reading fan, is Elise. Now, I say pleased. It's nice to see someone who used to play for Reading doing well, but I'm still a bit like, I miss him playing for us because we might go down this season because of financial irregularities, but that's probably for a different podcast. So or I could leave that to Flapjack, to be fair. I mean, if Flapjack can get Reading's points deductions into the next episode of Scoutcast, I'll be very pleased. Because, yeah, it's a big talking point for all of us. I'm sure we all have a very strong opinion on Reading's financial irregularities. But, yeah, so Elise with, I think, a hat-trick of assists today, and his stats in this game were just insane. So 6 key passes, 3 big chances, top of this game for XGI. He's looking good, and actually at the same price. I mean, that's the one thing I just haven't really talked about here with these Palace players, is they are actually super cheap. 5.4 for this run of fixtures is really, really exciting, especially when we're sort of trying to cram in some expensive players potentially in the next couple of weeks. But also, I think that these Palace players are beautiful if you are in my position, which is you've got your free hit left, you've got your wild card left, or, maybe you're in a position where, you have one of those two, potentially. You might have one of those two. You are kind of in this position where you can take some free hits, you can take some risks, you can take just a couple of punts, dead end your team into a particular game week. That's where I am. I got one more game week before I free hit in 32 and wildcard in 33. And so I've seen enough from Palace in 2 game weeks. I'm very, very happy owning one of their players for 1 game week and then using that as a bit of an audition of, am I going to keep you for my free hit and my wildcard? And, we're at this stage of the season where, that's the time of season where the differentials can make all the difference. So I think Palace is the place to look at. Eze and Elise are my 2 particular picks. It's kind of hard to go anywhere near the forwards because you still don't really know which one of Mateta and Edouard, and there's Ayew to think about as well. There's just a number of different forward players that sort of seem to swap in and out still, even under Hodgson. And of course, let's be honest, there aren't really many openings there, are there? There's not many openings there because Haaland, Kane, Watkins, they're the players that we're all looking at. So, yeah. That's something that sort of stops you looking at Palace forwards and really just makes you have to look at the midfielders. So, yeah, that's Palace. Now, before we finish, a little bit of a general overview of Saturday stats. A lot easier to go through Saturday stats before I come and do a 6:30 stream on a Sunday than it is to look at Sundays. Yeah. So Saturday stats then. There's a couple of useful things here, though. So Tony is determined to prove that selling him was a mistake, because when you consider that the stats that he recorded on Saturday were actually against Newcastle, looking pretty good. So Rashford was top of that particular of Saturday for shots with 7, but only one behind him was Tony with 6 against a Newcastle defence that has been doing very well this season. Now, I'll probably be leaving him out of my side for now, because as I said, I'm going to be free hitting in Gameweek 32. So leaving him out for now, and then maybe bringing him back for the Gameweek 32 where we have the blank because they're against Villa. Villa actually are defensively doing pretty well, but so were Newcastle. And Tony came in and, caused a lot of problems. And so I'm not really that too against maybe just doing a swapsy of some kind, potentially with Haaland as well, at some point. Because, obviously Haaland doesn't play. Well, I'm free hitting, but if you aren't, a swapsy with Haaland I think can work. Because if you've sold him recently, which, let's be honest, most of us have, you're probably not going to lose that much value to take him out and put him back in again for a week when he's not going to play. Because he might even go down 0.1 when he doesn't play, when everyone moves to sell him. So, who else to look at? Well, I know I said there wasn't exactly much room among the forwards right now, but I'm going to talk to you about another one, which is Dominic Solanke. His performance on Saturday shows he's still a bit of a differential option, sort of ready and waiting to happen. He's only got 1 goal in his last 3, but he is currently top of Joe's very famous goals imminent table right now. He's had 17 shots in the box in his last 4. 7 of those are on target. Now, he's only got 1 goal in that time, which is what you have 1 goal or less on Saturday of all players in that particular game, and he's top of goals imminent. He's getting ready to explode, is Solanke. So yeah, he's worth considering. But also someone else who also had 6 shots on Saturday is someone else I've already talked about, which is Fulham's Andreas Pereira. Now he only had 1 fewer shot than Rashford, so he was really, really busy. And interestingly enough, he's another person who got a little bit tipped this week. He didn't get anything against Bournemouth. Against West Ham. But there's still the opportunity. So the thing about Pereira is that he has actually now dropped to a shockingly low price of 4.3, which has happened because we all had him quite near the beginning of the season, and then we all sold him because he kind of stopped delivering and etc. etc. So then that has actually made him cheaper than the people we never bothered to own in the first place. So he's just 4.3 million now. Although actually, we've got someone in the chat whose name is Swellopela Saleka, hopefully I said that properly, who has Pereira. So you're in a good place, my friend, because I think he's going to do well in the next couple of weeks. So then the season ticker is quite useful here, which I'm going to flog again. As I said, you are going to get sick of me talking about this. Between now and Gameweek 38, only Liverpool rank higher than Fulham for attacking potential on the Fantasy Football Scout season ticker. So Everton and Leeds are Fulham's next 2. They've also got Leicester and Southampton to play on the other side of that nasty double game week against City and Liverpool. It's not a nice double game week, but if you're not bench boosting, which is probably likely because you've probably used it already, you can just bench Pereira for those 2 games if you want to, because it doesn't look very nice on paper. But at the same time, Liverpool's defence also looks shocking. So starting Pereira against Liverpool actually could be quite a differential move as well. Basically, Fulham's got nice fixtures, so that's worth noting. Now, of course, Mitrovic is missing, which could be an issue, but doesn't necessarily have to be. They have got some results without him in the team. So they beat Chelsea in double game week 19 when he was suspended. You may remember back in I'd forgotten about this, and then I re-remembered it when I was researching this, that Mitrovic, we all got him in for his double, knowing that 1 yellow card in the first game would mean he wouldn't actually double, and what did he do? He got booked. Thanks, man. But the thing is that they still beat Chelsea in that second game without Mitrovic in the team. They won 2-1, so they can get results without him. He was also missing for the 1-0 away win at Brighton in Gameweek 24. Brighton aren't exactly a terrible team right now, and they won there. And he was also missing from their 1-1 draw with Wolves in Gameweek 25. So from games against Wolves, Brighton and Chelsea, without Mitrovic, they got 7 points. So don't be too worried about him not being in the team. Now, Pereira in those games, I had a look at what he had done in games where Mitrovic wasn't there. And in the last 4, this is not including this weekend, so I will update it, but in the last 4 Fulham matches where they didn't have Mitrovic, Pereira got 2 attacking returns. He got a goal against Bournemouth, was one. And also, I think, got something in that Chelsea game. But yes, he was involved. He got 2 goal involvements in 4 games without Mitrovic. It is now 2 in 5, which isn't as good as before. But as I said, those fixtures are just really nice. They are really, really nice. And so I wouldn't be too concerned. And let's be honest, 4.3, if you've got the option to get him in, or you need someone to get someone else in, right now, he effectively is probably the best value player in the game. Because the fixtures, the form, the price, they're all there. He looks great. And yeah, I think he's someone to consider. So that brings us on just to our final section, which is just an opportunity for me to take some questions. Now, I'm going to scroll through the chat and see what questions are there already. But if you have a question, then chuck a few in. We'll spend maybe 5-10 minutes just answering a couple of questions. That's it. Heike New. And by the way, please tell me if I'm saying your name wrong. Has reminded me the thing I'd written down. Couldn't find it again when I was reading through that section. Mitrovic was missing against Man City. Pereira scored a penalty. So there we are. 4.3. Potential penalty taker without Mitrovic. You heard it here. Probably not first. But you heard it here most recently, because it was about a minute ago, so that's good. Our first question on this particular section has come from Chat Sport. He says, is Rashford for the sell? Well, if you are watching this live, but you missed earlier on, you can head back to about halfway through the video when we talked a little bit about this already, so that my more detailed thoughts are back there. In terms of my thoughts 20 minutes after talking about it, yeah, I think he's for the sell. There's a number of players I really like the look of, to be honest. Fernandes is one, because I can get to him. You know, if I want to get ready and get ahead of the curve in terms of the price before the double game week, then I might go for him. I'm also really tempted by the Palace players I've talked about, to Eze or Elise, especially if I'm, I can afford to be short term here. So that's just my team. You might not be in the same situation. If you can't afford to be short term, then maybe just go Fernandes. If you can't afford to be short-term, then I think a Palace midfielder is the way to go. We got a question from Cartola FC English Brazilian Fantasy League tips. I mean, hopefully that's not on your birth certificate, because that must be difficult to sing when it's your birthday. But you've got a very good question, which is Martinelli or Ødegaard for the next 2. Well, to be honest, I'm at the point now where I feel like I have the wrong one. So I have Ødegaard, and every time Arsenal play and Martinelli gets something, despite the fact I have 3 Arsenal players, the game gives me a red arrow. It's very annoying. So if you've not used livefpl.net, then start using it, because it's great. It is a great live tool that tells you exactly what your rank is right now, rather than sort of like 6 hours later when you wait for the app to load up. And what it's really good at doing, I probably should have got a screenshot of this, maybe for next time. What it can show you is it can show you exactly how much of a green arrow and how much of a red arrow every player is going to give you. So when it shows you your team, each player will have their points and it'll have the bonus and things like that. And then it will say that this particular player, because of its ownership, he's taken you up 10k places. And then next to it has, kind of the same thing with players you don't own, and the ones who are giving you the biggest reds. And then, of course, your rank obviously just takes all those numbers and then offsets them. That's kind of, it breaks that down and reverse engineers it to show you like the minutiae of exactly why you went up, why you went down, or whatever. And every single week, I get a huge red arrow from Martinelli. And Ødegaard, whatever he does, gives me very small green arrows within that whole framework. And so every week I'm thinking, I've just got to get him. And the problem is we talked about Rashford, haven't we? Who do I get for Rashford? I can't even replace Rashford with Martinelli, who, by the way, should just say that's not a bad shout for some people if you don't already have him. The reason I can't do it is because I've got Ødegaard, I've got Saka, and I've got White. So in order for me to get Martinelli, I have to sell one of my Arsenal midfielders. Do I really want to sell Ødegaard? Not really. I think Martinelli is a better option, but selling someone who I also think is not a bad option to get someone who's also a good option just to play rank feels a bit cumbersome. So it's a tricky one. But if I'm being offered a carte blanche, and the simple framework of this question is who I think is better, it is unfortunately Martinelli. That is the one I would go for if I could. Max Pike says, I have 0.1 in the bank, so I feel I need to do Rashford to Grealish before I get priced out. However, Champions League, any tips? Well, okay, first things first, find yourself, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, I don't know. Find yourself a site that lets you know roughly when someone might go up. I haven't had a look at where Grealish is at, but I wouldn't be surprised if his price may be on the rise, because he is doing well. I referred to earlier in Tweet of the Week, FPL Corf said, you just know the second everyone signs him, despite the fact that he's played for ages and he's basically the most used Man City player these days, he's just going to disappear from the face of the earth when you sign him. Remember that, that might happen. I think it sort of depends on your team. I referenced earlier the fact that I usually don't take that many risks in an FPL season, but this season I've taken quite a few because I've sort of kind of taken a new approach to FPL now of what's the worst that can happen if it goes wrong. The worst that can happen if it goes wrong is I get a red arrow, and letting go of how bad a red arrow makes you feel is really important, because once you've done that, it means that you can be a bit freer with the risks you take, and that has helped me actually get quite high up the ranks compared to where I was. When I was doing these videos before, I was ranked sort of like 800k, and you people were all very lovely watching me talk about my terrible team. But thankfully, I'm now up to about 57k. So that risk taking has worked. And so I'm slightly more kind of thinking that my tip to you now is maybe just do it, because if what happens in the Champions League somehow is damaging for your team, what's the worst that can happen? Who's on your bench right now? I right now have too many people on my bench I don't want to bench. I know I'm not the only one in that situation, so I had to bench Matoma this week. And actually, to be honest, if any of my front 8 had my front 7, I have a front 8. That's my problem, because I have a 5th midfielder who I want to start every week and 3 strikers. If any of them had not played and Matoma had come in, I'm saying this obviously after he didn't get anything, but let's be honest, he should have done. If he'd have come in, if one of my players had missed out, I wouldn't have been like, oh no. I would have been like, oh, okay, that's all right. I've got Matoma coming in for a sub. So if your bench isn't that bad, if you're in a similar benching situation than me, and you're worried about being priced out of Grealish, and Grealish is a player you really, really want to have, then the old David would say, wait for some news. The new David is like, just do it, man. Just give it a go. Like, you've got how many game weeks left? 8 now. So it's a risk, but it could come off. It's a bit like gambling on the pass. One of the best things about watching Man City as a team is when someone in a deeper midfield role receives a ball, that before the balls even touch their foot, everyone else around them is making forward runs. Now, of course, if you do that and the number 6, when he receives the ball, gets tackled, you've pushed yourself 10 yards further up the pitch, and it's much easier for a team to get counter-attacked. But 90 times out of 100, he's going to get that ball, and you've already stolen a march on that midfielder. It's a little bit like that analogy. If you go in there early on Grealish, you might get there before other people are priced out. And if all goes according to plan, which it could, I'm not saying it will, but obviously it could. He maybe doesn't play in the Champions League, or he plays half an hour, they go 7-0 up, and he comes off just to rest him, and he looks very likely to start next game week, then you've made the right decision. You're gambling on the past with that, but I think it could come off, to be honest. So that's my tip to you on that one. Chat Sport says Maddison and Rashford might be coming out of the team this week. Totally understand. Heather says Maddison out for who? I still have my wild card. I'm probably going to be doing it in wild card 34. I'm going to be free hitting as well, but not in 32. I have Matoma, Rashford, Jensen, and Saka. Maddison out for who? Well, I'm going to be really lazy here and kind of just answer that question with people I've already given you. If you can get to Grealish, give it a go. If you can't, then maybe, hold on. If you can get to Grealish or Fernandes, because they're the expensive ones, then I think they're worth looking at. If you can't get to them, and you have talked about the fact that you do have your wild card, and you have got a free hit, which you don't want to do in 32, but you still can, I still think Crystal Palace. I think if you go for Eze or Elise, I think you're going to be very, very happy. And of course, if you go that way, you're freeing up a little bit more money to maybe turn. You could. I don't want to play around with the value of your team here, but Rashford or Saka could then potentially go to Fernandes when the time is right. So I think that's the way to go. Either go up to Grealish or Fernandes, or go down to a Palace midfielder. And I will make this the last question, if that's okay. Ali Mafaz says Rashford and Shaw out or keep. So we kind of already talked about Rashford. So the reason I want to talk about this is because of Shaw. hasn't played this week, obviously, got that injury. The thing about Shaw is we're not really sure, if you'll pardon the pun, how often he is actually out for, which is a bit annoying. I personally would sell him. If you are someone who's only just tuning into this video, you will find some very useful information that I take no credit for. I took it from Fantasy Football Scout and I took it from the editorial team and I simply just delivered it to you guys about the Man United defence. I don't really think they're that essential anymore. Selling Shaw is not really a difficult decision for me right now because they're pretty good defensively at home, but 5 of their next 8 matches are away. In their last 4 away matches, only one team's conceded more big chances than them. So basically, United away from home, not really that defensively sound. Their double game week, I would be more interested in their attack personally than their defence because it's Villa and Brighton, and the fact that we all have loads of Brighton midfielders and we've all got Watkins shows you that you are going to be kind of hedging against your own team if you're going to take a United defender into that game week. So that's just kind of how I see it there. Chat Sport has actually helped answer this question for me by saying that the left back for Villa looks good for assists, which, if I'm getting my flanks correct, I think I am, is Alex Moreno. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know if you're supposed to. It sounds a bit more like Mourinho. I don't know, but that guy, he's 4.4, I think, very cheap. Got 5 points at the weekend. Did get booked, but Chat Sport is right. He's looking very exciting. So he was my replacement, and Villa's fixtures in the short term are quite nice. So yeah, and Heike New says that my pronunciation of their name was close enough, which I will take. I will take that. Thank you very much. I'd much rather see you say that it was close enough than put in the chat that the way I pronounced it was highly offensive. That's always good. So yeah, and Chat Sport is confirming that I did get my Villa flanks right, which is good. We got there eventually. I apologise for the audio issues at the beginning. We will we will get there eventually. Next time I'll put my microphone nearer my mouth when we start talking. Back in the old days, tech issues were something to do with, that's not plugged in here, or I need to reboot this. These days, it's simply the fact that my mic wasn't near enough to my mouth. That's how you know I'm over 30 now. So, yeah, thank you very much for tonight. It was great to be back. It was great to chat with you guys again. Really nice to see some comments in the chat saying how much you've missed this stream. I've missed it too, so it's good to be back, and I'm glad that you're happy it is as well. Before I go, just want to make sure that you know that there is loads of Fantasy Football Scout content out there to devour between now and the next deadline. Awesome articles on the website penned by Neil and Tom and the rest of his team. They are fantastic. Some great videos coming up too. There'll be a Scoutcast this week. There'll be team news as well. You will have stats of the week. You're going to have burning questions. Big shout out to the burning questions guys, by the way. Well done on Sky Sports this weekend. And then got to have a front row seat to seeing Son score that goal at Spurs as well. So they're having a good week. And so you should help keep them having a good week by watching them this week too. And yeah, Scoutcast, team news, all of it. If you are not already subscribed to the Fantasy Football Scout YouTube channel, now is the time to resolve that problem. Forget your transfers into your fantasy team. The transfer in you really need is you into the list of subscribers to Fantasy Football Scout YouTube channel. Like this video, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos, and you will no doubt soar up the FPL ranks between now and the end of the season when it really matters, when you've got mini league mates to beat, you've got OR rank history to get PBs on. You're not going to find anywhere better than this channel to help you achieve it. So make sure you do that. And with that, it's a goodbye from me. Thanks very much, and I will see you next weekend.